Let's get a little reporting on what the fallout and the meaning of this decision to have Brett Kavanaugh, appellate judge from the D.C. Circuit. We got Jim Acosta at the White House. How's it playing?
Yeah. Chris, well, we're just trying to grab a few folks as they were leaving the room here, some of the VIPs on hand for the president's announcement. Just very briefly caught up with the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. I asked him if he wanted to comment. He said really nothing more than, I think he'll be great. And then he was moving along his way. So somebody we don't get a whole lot of questions to took a quick question from me as he was leaving the room. Also, we should point out Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, Mark Short, the head of legislative affairs over here at the White House. They were both fielding questions from reporters. Not saying a whole lot from a newsy standpoint. Sarah Sanders did say that they don't anticipate any problems at this point getting Justice Kavanaugh confirmed. That is obviously something that she would say, but she said that we don't think it will take until October this fall to get Kavanaugh confirmed. So they feel pretty confident about all of that. Obviously, this process is going to get started almost immediately. Kavanaugh, I'm sure, will be up on Capitol Hill, if not tomorrow, shortly thereafter, meeting with senators. All we saw in the room, Chris, were Republican senators, although they invited a group of Democratic lawmakers over here. None of those Democratic lawmakers said yes. And then the other thing we should point out, Senator Mike Lee, whose name came up in the beginning of this process, was not a main contender at the end of the process, said he thinks Kavanaugh will be, quote, terrific. And so all in all, this was pretty much a cheering section inside the East Room of the White House. They're pretty high on Brett Kavanaugh, but as you were just saying before you came out to me, obviously this is the test. Can they get somebody who came out with a young family, somebody who promises to judge the Constitution as it's written? But he said also respecting American tradition and history and so on. He didn't give a whole lot of tea leaves here in terms of exactly how he'll rule from the bench, but overall a very positive reception here at the White House and a lot of confidence among top White House officials that Justice Kavanaugh should be confirmed rather easily, and that obviously is something we'll be seeing in the days and weeks to come, Chris.
Well, with the numbers so tight, easily, we'll have to see how it plays out. It could be that way, but we'll have to see, and I don't think you can take any of the nominee speeches from our lifetime, Jim, and take that one paragraph and have a lot of differences. I believe in an independent judiciary. I will have an open mind, case-by-case basis. But as we know, that means different things to different people when they get on the court. Jim, thank you very much.
That's right. You bet.
We have the great debate, but before I get to it, Jake, one thing, big issue that we didn't talk about yet, timing.
Yeah.
We know what the process is, but Trump said it, Sarah Sanders said it, all the Republicans say, speedy, speedy, speedy. It should happen right away. Any chance that this could be forestalled until the midterms?
I doubt it, just because the Republicans control the Senate. But I will say this. There are a lot of documents to go through when you consider that he worked for George H.W. Bush, Ken Starr, George W. Bush, and that's not even getting into his legal documents. He worked for Elian Gonzalez. He worked for Bush v. Gore. There are, I don't think it's crazy to say hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages that the Senate Judiciary Committee is going to have to go over. That said, they want this done, and the majority rules.
And Grassley can make his certain rules in terms of how much paper is needed to be reviewed before they get to the main Senate.
Yeah, ultimately they'll make that decision.
And they have already laid out the schedule they want. They say they want the hearings to begin shortly after Labor Day and to have a vote by the first Monday in October, which happens this year to be October 1st. So it's going to have to be fast. But as you point out, Mitch McConnell controls the calendar, and if he has to sit all night to let the Democrats talk, I think that's precisely what he'll do.
Let me make a call on the fly here. Why waste all these good minds and limit it to only two? So let's bring in Rick Santorum and Jeniifer Granholm, but let's add it to the mix. You guys don't have to go point for point with each other. We got a lot of people here that you can go back and forth with. So let's get the perspective from each of you quickly about how much confidence you have in this choice. Jeniifer, first to you, from the perspective of the Democrats.
Yeah, the Democrats have to realize that just because they don't have the majority in the Senate doesn't mean that a majority of Americans don't want to see this person because of the health care issue that you raised. This Affordable Care Act decision that he made in Seven Skies and his criticism of Justice Roberts in the ultimate Affordable Care Act decision are huge tells of where he will be. when you combine that with the fact that there is a case that's coming out of Texas that is challenging the pre-existing condition, the requirement to cover people with pre-existing conditions, and it's being brought by all these Republican AGs, and it's going to end up at the Supreme Court, and the pressure on him to support those Republicans, given that he is, as Jake said, a Republican operative. This is a huge health care issue. And look at the people, wait, let me just quickly say, look at the people who will be deciding this. If you look at Joe Manchin, number of people who are uninsured in West Virginia have dropped by 62%.
And he just said it in his own statement, Jeniifer. He just said in his own statement, Joe Manchin, that this matters. Pre-existing conditions matters. He has to talk to the man. But they don't need his vote to get him through. But they don't need his vote to get him through.
I know, but you guys have been talking about will Democrats go over. So Democrats have to hold on to it, and people who are citizens out there who care about pre-existing conditions need to knock and call and Murkowski, and, who knows what's going to happen with John McCain. But the bottom line is, the Affordable Care Act was held up by those two and John McCain. This can be held up as well if people care about health care.
Well, but also, to your point, John Roberts wound up holding it up. He wrote that decision. But so let's just vet what you're saying right now with Joan, because why waste the resource? So the idea that Kavanaugh is a vote to take down the ACA. Fair point.
Well, I do think it's a fair point to raise. He sidestepped it in 2011. It doesn't mean at all that he'd sidestep it the next time. I actually think that Jeniifer has a point, that that's a big deal, a very big deal, and given his leanings on things, I think that he could vote against it. So I think that should be the kind of thing that's aired as much as possible there.
Yeah, Rick, go ahead. To you.
Yeah, I mean, first off, he's replacing Justice Kennedy, who voted against Justice Roberts. So the idea that this is going to change the balance of the court of Obamacare is just folly. Number one, if Justice Roberts went with the four liberals on the court. So this is much ado about nothing. The reality is Democrats are running away from the Affordable Care Act, and they want to abolish it too. So they want Medicare for all, a single-payer system. Sure they are. Sure they are. Every Democrat running for president is running for Medicare for all. That's running away from the Affordable Act because they don't think it works. So to bring up a scare campaign when you're replacing one judge who voted against the Affordable Care Act for another who might do the same doesn't change the balance on the court. So get another issue. There are a lot bigger issues here, but the Democrats' meme in this election is we're going to run on health care, so they're trying to somehow bootstrap this particular case into some sort of campaign against Kavanaugh. It's not going to work.
Rick, what are you going to say? There are all of these Republican attorneys general who are bringing up the pre-existing condition, the ban on, so that's going to come to the Supreme Court.
He replaced the judge that voted against it the last time.
Yeah, and every one of the Republicans, including John Roberts, could take a look at it again, Rick. I mean, that's the point of having an overwhelmingly Republican Supreme Court. But Roberts ruled the other way in one issue.
Roberts wrote it the other way, but things can change, Rick, and you're not giving any credence to what Kavanaugh has done on his own bench, shouldn't you?
Well, look, I think if you look at what he's done on his own bench on this issue, he sidestepped the issue. He actually referred to this as a tax.
But he criticized Roberts' decision. Doesn't that tell you what you need to know?
Well, but he also agreed with Roberts in the sense that he thought this was a tax. So I mean, he used a somewhat arcane measure to dispose of the case. The bottom line is, I don't think this is going to be a particularly effective line because you have Justice Roberts, who seems pretty intent, at least from his rulings, on maintaining the ACA.
Well, but here's the thing, to bring it back out here, the reason that this issue is a legitimate issue, okay? They'll have political arguments about which side they're on about it, but what Kavanaugh would do with the ACA is a legitimate issue. But here's the problem. Unless you can glean it from the cases that have done it in the past, we'll never understand it from the nomination process.
Ever since Robert Bork in 1987, nominees...
Who was too honest.
Well, exactly. Nominees, they asked Robert Bork tough questions about his views, and he answered them, a mistake that no subsequent nominee has made. And so we can anticipate the pleasant stonewall that every subsequent nominee has gotten. So basically, we're going to have to listen to partisans from both sides extrapolate from Kavanaugh's record.
What these confirmation hearings have ended up being are little speeches about how great the nominee is, or the senator's concerns about the nominee, and the nominee not saying anything.
Right.
The nominee, I think John Roberts' favorite technique was just to say, basically to cite case law that was relevant and just wear out the clock.
Because he knew the senators up there weren't going to know half the cases. They'd have to consult with everybody behind them.
Brett Kavanaugh has already appeared before the Senate. He has been asked his views on Roe v. Wade. He has, just to give an example that a lot of people are talking about these days, he has said that he respects precedent and he would not give his personal opinion. We're going to see that again.
Yeah, they always say the same things. Now, Rick, here's another thing for you to contend with in defending the choice. Now, President Trump, this guy was not on his early lists, okay? He wasn't on the May or September 2016 lists. And the speculation was it was because he was too much of an insider, too close to Bush, whatever, who knows what it was. He's there now. He's his nominee now. But this man has spent a lot of his life pushing the position, Brett Kavanaugh I'm talking about, that presidents should not be bothered with litigation, that they should not be subject to litigation. And that is an awfully coincidental position for him to hold, given what President Trump could be heading into politically. Yes or no?
Well, yes, but I mean, if you want to look at the other side, he also worked for Ken Starr and drafted impeachment resolutions that said if you lie to the American public, you should be impeached.
If you lie under oath to the American public.
No, he said to the public.
I know, but I'm saying that's what wound up being the difference materially.
Yeah.
No, but I understand that. But I mean, Kavanaugh, I mean, that's something I suspect the Democrats are going to have a lot of fun with.
They'll have fun with it, but obviously Trump's gotten over it because he picked him, right? So I think that what must have mattered more to him was that this is a jurist who doesn't believe in a president being exposed to a lot of legal pressure.
I think that's a general perception within the legal community that the president of the United States should not be, should not be subject to indictment. The way to deal with the president of the United States, if there's any kind of illegal activity, is to impeach him. That's how the Constitution deals with it. And so I don't think there's a whole lot of lawyers out there of the caliber that we're talking about who believe that we should have the judiciary, bringing the president into court. I don't think that's a good idea.
Jeniifer
That's not what the Constitution
how
provides.
big a deal for you will it be that Kavanaugh has written and ruled that presidents shouldn't be distracted by investigations and lawsuits?
It's more than that. It's more than distractions. That he has said that presidents should not be indicted. Presidents should not even be under investigation if the president doesn't agree to it. In that Seven Skies decision, in the dissent for the Affordable Care Act decision that he was overruled in on the D.C. Circuit, he was talking about how a president should just be able to interpret the Constitution in the way that he sees fit. It's like as though he is writing the script for a president being above the law. If this person is going to sit on the Supreme Court when anything related to the Mueller investigation comes before the Supreme Court, if that happens, then I would hope that senators will be asking whether he will recuse himself, given what he has said about the power of the executive and the unfettered power of the executive.
What do you think about that, Joan?
Hold on, Rick.
Let me get Joan here.
He's not above the law.
Rick. Hold on a second.
He's subject to the Congress.
I know, but I get what
your
opinion is. I get what your opinion is about it. I'm just saying, given what Kavanaugh has said, let's get some context on what that would mean. The idea of what Granholm is saying, that maybe he'd have to recuse himself, we've almost never seen that.
No, I don't think he's going to have to recuse himself. Right. But I do want to make a point about his general attitude toward executive prerogatives, executive power. Very strong in those areas, not just when it comes to things like what we would expect with the Mueller investigation, but just the president's power, for example, to challenge the consumer financial CFPB.
Which he thinks is unconstitutional.
Yes, he was in dissent when the D.C. Circuit upheld it, saying that, these kinds of agencies are like a fourth branch of government starting to steal power. And so he's very strong in that area. But one thing I just want to make sure we say on the record,
please,
I don't think that we can judge what John Roberts is going to do in any subsequent health care cases by what he did the first time around.
And can I just offer the fact that Joan is just completing a biography of John Roberts, so she's in a position to know better than any of us about that.
So it'll be a fresh case, and Justice Kennedy's vote might have made a difference, and now it will be Brett Kavanaugh's.
All right, so let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Let's take a look. Everybody can check their social media and see how this is playing, and we'll see what the big issues are that are popping up early on. Brett Kavanaugh is the president's nominee for Supreme Court. Will he pass the test with the Senate? We'll see. The big questions ahead. Stay with CNN.